You are listening to the Final Say Radio Show, a Rappaport media production, with your host Brett Rappaport and co-host John Rappaport.
We have our first guest today, and I want to welcome to the Final Say Radio Show, speaking with Brett and John Rappaport. Congressman Bill Johnson is from the 6th District of Ohio. This is Brett. We thank you so much for joining us, and some of the things we're going to discuss today are so passionate to both of us. And I want to start off, if we can, Congressman. If you look at what's happening right now in Ukraine, between the Ukrainian, let's just, for the lack of a better word right now, call it a civil war, being influenced heavily by the Russians, and also on the other part, there's influence coming from Europe and from, of course, the United States. But this draws to our discussion on energy, because Europe is, they're holding their breath, because the pipelines run through Ukraine, supplying Russian gas and oil to many countries, if not all, in Europe. It's a significant source of their energy, and it leads to a discussion that many of us have for a long time, and that is energy independence, or at least obtaining your energy from people that you could depend upon. And right now, I don't know if that's the case. Congressman?
Well, you're exactly right, Brett. And, I will go so far as to say I think this is more than a civil war. I think this is tantamount to a Russian invasion. I mean, the pro-Russian separatists are funded and supported by the Russians. Many believe that there are actually Russian troops in nondescript uniforms using Russian equipment. I mean, that's what they used when they shot down the Malaysian airliner. But you bring up a very valid point, and that's what we've been trying to tell the administration for a long time. A strong domestic energy policy here at home can have profound implications on the foreign policy stage. And if you want to change the conversation with Vladimir Putin, then give our European friends and allies, and even maybe those that don't like us too much but that respect us nonetheless, give them a choice to buy their energy resources from America, from a friendly and a responsible ally, and take that trump card away from Vladimir Putin. They used the protection of the indigenous Russians as a justification for annexing the Crimea and starting this operation. And now I can guarantee you, at least my perception is, they're going to try to use the fact that 80% of that oil flows through pipelines that go through the Ukraine. They're going to use their own national survival and their economy as a reason to sustain and advance that operation. So there's only one way out of this, and that is to hit the Russians where it hurts the most, in their pocketbook. And the best way to do that, just like Ronald Reagan did, let's do it without firing a shot. Let's put America in the game and give Putin something else to think about.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Congressman, because this is dangerous territory that we find ourselves. The last thing we want, I don't think any of us ever want war. We certainly don't want to end up in a war with Russia. But when you make bad choices and you don't handle these decisions correctly on both parts, you could find yourselves in that situation. And I think you're absolutely correct. I think if we use economic and diplomatic means to send the correct message, and legitimate message, of course, and work with our partners in Europe and elsewhere to do so, I think we can get the Russians to the table to work through these problems, because I know many people from that region. I'm very familiar with it. Energy is such an enormous part of their economy that is what the decisions are based on. And now I just want to bring up one. Just one quick point.
Go ahead.
There has been reference to a lot of military components that the Russians have being made in Ukraine, and I've been told by a few sources most of what's being made in Ukraine are insignificant, and so that's not really anything to fret over. This is simply two issues. One, whether they are really interested in supporting Russian-speaking people, and then two, the bigger thing, it's really about energy.
Yeah, and I don't think we know the final answer to that yet. But there are some striking similarities between what Putin is doing now and what Hitler did at the beginning of World War II, and the world's response to that in both cases. You couldn't have said it better. These are some very, very serious decisions that have to be made. And no, we do not want to be in a war. But the thing that makes our economic strength so powerful is the understanding that we have the military strength to back it up if that fails. And so that's a big, big incentive for the Russians to come to the table. They do not want to fight America openly in an all-out conflict, and we don't want to have to do that either. But they need to know that we're prepared to do that. So in addition to where we see ourselves with a bad energy policy here at home that's not giving us the tools that we need on the foreign policy stage, we also have an administration that is tearing down our military and making it significantly more difficult for our commanders in the field to project that force strength that's necessary to hold those guys in check.
Congressman, this is John now. You just described what I would simply refer to as the M&M factor, right? It's about military and it's about money, right? Our ability to project power and our ability to influence it with dollars. I believe the single biggest threat to the U.S. moving forward actually is going to come from a desire that the Chinese and the Russians collectively have, which is to remove the greenback as the world's reserve currency. It seems to me like the greatest risk of that happening is actually derived from the lack of an aggressive energy policy. So I want to get your take on that, because I believe it's actually the potential tipping point that would allow the slow removal of the greenback, first by energy trading, which would then make it wide open to reserve currency attacks.
Yeah, we've already seen how these other countries manipulate their currency, how they subsidize their various industries and put American businesses at a disadvantage. We've seen how that happens. We know that these other countries are not following the same rules that our administration, that our president and his regulating agencies are putting on our energy sector, making it more and more difficult for us to achieve energy independence and security, and making it more difficult for our businesses and workers here at home to compete. And I agree with you. They would love it if the American dollar would collapse to the point that they could choose another world standard, for everybody. And that's I don't think I disagree with you in the strong possibility that will happen. But some strong decisions have to be made here at home to keep that from happening. And I'm hoping that we can get some cooperation out of this administration to understand the dire consequences if they don't take that appropriate action.
Believe me, I don't want to meet the congressman or woman who wouldn't disagree with me on that point, because that would show a lack of conviction to doing the job necessary to ensure it doesn't happen. So please disagree all day long. I'm looking,
I got you. Yeah.
I'm looking at your website right now at billjohnson.house.gov, and it's almost shocking. I'm watching the U.S. debt clock turn, and my share of that, which is now $54,901. So that has a very direct impact. When you think about the one area that America could most immediately control that would stop the export of dollars, is that not energy? And isn't that probably one of the most important aspects of the energy policy? And did you not kind of touch on the biggest downside ramification of that, which is, aren't we funding the buildup of the armies and navies of the countries that want to do us harm?
Well, absolutely we are. When we put our energy sector on the downhill slide, and when we force up the prices of regulations and the cost of energy for our manufacturing sector here at home, that makes them less competitive. And what countries like China and India and other countries, even throughout the Middle East, then do is take that advantage to not follow those rules, build coal-fired power plants, stand up their power grids without any consideration for the environment whatsoever, and pump all that effort into building up their manufacturing arm, and essentially that gives them the capability to build up their military. I mean, anyone who doesn't understand that China is flexing her muscle economically, flexing her muscle militarily, and if the world only knew, 90% of the world's commerce still flows across the ocean, and about 70% of the world's commerce flows through a strait in the Pacific called the Strait of Malacca. I'm sure you're familiar with it. That's a big number. That's a big number. What if the Chinese decide they want to control that, shut that down? You go all the way back to World War I times when our country's great naval commanders began to emphasize how important it is that we control the sea lines of communication. And that requires a strong Navy and a strong military to do that. And it concerns me greatly where this administration is taking us.
A final question that I have for you before I return you to Brett is, do you find, and let's say when the microphones and the cameras are off, do you feel both Republican and hopefully Democrat alike that there's some sobriety level in the halls of Congress that recognizes the risk America is at when we have a lack of energy independence, and we're sort of, best way I could say it is I think we're indentured foreign policy servants to a lot of nefarious actors on the world stage, meaning we can't make good policy decisions on other things like terrorism or what's happening in Ukraine as a manifestation of lack of energy policy and independence. And again, does that reflect itself in the halls of Congress? Is it taken seriously enough?
Yeah, it is. It is taken very seriously, but the problem, John, is this. In our pluralistic system of government, it requires all three branches of the government to work well, the Congress, the President, the judicial branch, and it requires both chambers of the Congress to work as well. And you asked me if I perceive that sobriety on both sides of the aisle, and yes, I do, but I'm going to confess to you that I feel it less from the left side than I do from the right side. And the reason why is because you've got a president. Keep in mind that there are two major battles being fought in our nation's capital right now. The political battle to determine who's in control, and the governance battle to decide the decisions that controlling party makes. Right now, the Democrats are the controlling party in Washington. And because they can't get their way, they choose to legislate through regulations, and consequently, what we have is more politics than governance, and that's what needs to change. We get to where we are, we achieve the honor of representing the American people through a political process, but we must put political differences aside when it comes to doing what's right for the sake of the nation. And for 6 years now, this president has not governed. He has not led. He's never been forced to, because the Senate has never worked with the House to put legislation on the desk of the president that would qualify and quantify his positions rather than letting him go out and make campaign speeches about it.
All right, those are all excellent points, Congressman, that you brought up there. And I want to add something to that. It seems to me that, all presidencies have their own agenda and their own politics, but I can't think of too many who haven't come together with the other party at some point to work on legislation, or at least in a time of serious issues, whether it be terrorism or war or massive economic problems, that they've worked together. Bill Clinton's a perfect example. He went on it. He went on his own path at the beginning of his presidency, but he recognized the need to sit down with someone like Newt Gingrich and the Republicans in the House to get something done and accomplished for the American people. And I think you're spot on. What we have seen as a president who is unwilling to budge, I think, at all from where he stands on these issues. And quite frankly, and this is my opinion, not necessarily yours, I think he's wrong to begin with. And when he doubles down on being wrong, he's only harming the American people and those that he's supposed to be representing.
Well, he does, Brent. And you hit the nail on the head. This president holds great contempt for Congress, even more contempt for the Republicans that serve in Congress. And he has made it very, very clear that he doesn't think he needs Congress to do his job. As he said in his State of the Union, I've got a phone and I've got a pen, and if Congress doesn't act, I will. Well, but his definition of acting is do it my way or no way, and that's never been a rule that gets us moving forward. I mean, look at what Ronald Reagan said. Ronald Reagan said, if I can get 70% of what I want, I'm going to take that and press forward to get some of the rest of it on another day.
Right.
And he told members of his own party that. You know, Ronald Reagan said something else. There's no limit to what a person can accomplish if they don't care who gets the credit. This is not about patting ourselves on the back or pounding our chest. We're here to do the will of the American people.
That's absolutely right. And one thing I noticed just in the recent debates on immigration, regardless of whether you're for it or not, the president several times made the statement that, well, it seems to me that we in the House agree on 80% of this. It's the other 20% that we don't. Well, if that's the case, if we agree on 80%, then why not accept what the Republicans passed in the House? Why not the Senate just vote on that and go with the 80% and take it from there? We could argue the rest later, but at least you've accomplished 80% if that's what he actually believes. I don't believe that to be the case, but...
Yeah, I don't think he believes that either. I've sat in meetings with this president. I've seen the way that his staff responds, and I'm going to tell you, here's the difference. Ronald Reagan used to come into his staff meeting. He would start the staff meeting off with a joke, and then he would listen to his cabinet. He would listen, and then he would take on the issues, and he would go away, and he would confer with experts and get his own decisions together, and then he would make a decision. In meetings with this president, there's one person that talks, this president. And if anybody else says anything, they're watching to see what his reaction is going to be. This president doesn't like to be told anything that he doesn't want to hear.
Yeah, that's a good point. Congressman, I have a question for you, because this was something that was reported, and I haven't seen it really touched on in quite some time, but it was reported toward the beginning of the presidency in his first term that he didn't meet too often with his cabinet. Do you know that to be the case, or are you aware?
I do not know. I do not know. I've heard those same reports, and we've even had senior members of the administration, in dealing with the health care law and all of that. We've had them report that their meetings with the president were few and far between. So, I don't have the facts, but what few facts I do have, my gut level opinion is the president acts largely on his own.
Yeah, that's interesting, and I haven't heard different, but I'd love to know that answer. I mean, Congressman, just in the moment we have left with you, I do want to say this. I think you've done terrific work in following the energy policy. I think it's so important, not just for national security reasons, but for our economy and for creating jobs and prosperity in this country. We need a clear vision for energy policy. We need more development in energy, more advancement. We need to be the world's leader in this arena, and we need to share it with the world. And I know
you are. You've heard me say this before. What we could do if we had that kind of energy policy, you would see an era of innovation that America hasn't seen since John Kennedy launched us on the great moon race. And look what that gave us over a 20-year period. My goodness, we're still enjoying the benefits of that today. America is a problem solver. We solve problems. We don't create them. And it's time that we have a leader in the White House that wants to be a problem solver too.
Well, absolutely. Well, Congressman, we're certainly happy that we have members like you in the House. And I just want to leave you with this one thought. I hate when the media refers to Congress in a way that it means the House, because there's certainly a huge difference between the House and the Senate, particularly today. I think the House does a pretty good job of innovating ideas and sending bills over to the Senate. I think they just sit there and rot, and the business isn't happening in America because of the Senate. So thank you for the good work that you're doing, sir. And please share with us again your website so everyone could check you out.
Absolutely. It's billjohnson.house.gov, and thanks, guys, for the opportunity. Appreciate it very much.
Okay. Take care. We look forward to speaking with you again sometime. Take care.